Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to go over how to create a Gantt chart to show employee schedules or anybody's schedules really. You can use this for time off and just sort of any sort of schedule tracking that you may want to do. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to create a table that's going to have a list of the schedule. So I'll have the day, the employee, their start time, and their end time. Let's just convert this into a table just to make it easier later on. So what I'm going to do is enter something like, let's say January 1st, we had employee A. They started working from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. On the same day, employee B, they started, let's say, from 10 a.m. and went to 6 p.m. And so what I want to do is show this on a chart to show their different schedules. And to do this, what I'm going to do is first put an area for the date. So I'm going to type in January 1st and stretch it across so that it's easy to change and adjust if need be. And then going across the top, I'll have the different time slots. So let's say 8 a.m., 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and so on and so forth. And so the one thing to remember when you're entering time in Excel, you want to put a space between the number you type and the AM or PM indicator. Otherwise, it won't read properly. So every time I type in 2 o'clock, I make sure, I'd put a space and then do a PM. So if you do it this way, it'll read it properly as time, and you won't have to worry about doing any sort of adjustments later on. So I've created this table, and let's say I want to have employee A, employee B listed here. What I'm going to do is also adjust my rows, just they're fairly big, size 30, and it's easier to stand out. Let's create a grid here, and I'll get rid of my grid lines. So now I've got a clean slate as far as the schedule goes. So to make this work, what I'm going to do is enter in some formulas. And this is where having that table makes this easy to do, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a SUMIFS function, and I use the SUMIFS function because it's convenient if you've got multiple criteria, and I'll show you why. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sum the day, and really this doesn't matter. It's a number, that's all that matters to me. I'm just going to look to see if it has a value of more than 0, if there's something in there. So I can enter my multiple criteria here. So first thing I'm going to do is look at the employee column. Then my criteria range is going to be that employee column. See if it's employee A. For my next criteria, I'm going to look at the start time and say, okay, was this less than or equal to, I'm going to use an ampersand to connect this with my time up here. So if it's less than or equal to, then that person started at 8 a.m. or earlier, right? So that's an important criteria. Next up, I'm going to look at the ending range. And this time I'm going to do similar, except I'm going to look at greater than or equal to this time. So basically the employee would have had to start at least at 8 a.m. or earlier, and they had to finish at 8 a.m. or later for this criteria to be met, right? So I'm going to close this out, and I've done that correctly. So it returns back this date value, and that really doesn't matter because I'm just wanting to see if that value gets filled in with anything. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to freeze some cells. So right now, A5, it's pulling at the employee in column A. So I just want to freeze column A. And then for B4, that one's looking at this time. So I'm going to freeze the 4 because that's always going to be in row 4. Same thing over here. And now I've copied it. Now I'm going to copy and paste. Now you don't want to drag this when you're working with tables. And one of the reasons why I'll show you is if I were to drag this over, it's actually going to adjust my fields. So if you notice here at the top, I've got day switched to employee, start from employee, right? So it actually shifted things over. So you want to actually do Control-C and Control-V. So it's tempting to drag it, but you don't want to do that when you're dealing with tables just because that can happen. So Control-C and Control V. And so now you'll notice for these ones, employee B, they started at 10 a.m., right? So their time slot here would not get filled in until 10 a.m. Now they go until 6 o'clock, so we're fine. This schedule only goes up until 5. So basically they've satisfied that criteria. Now let's say we modified employee A to say, okay, let's say they actually started at 12 p.m. Automatically updates for you quickly and easily. And so you can do this sort of thing for vacation days, whatever the case may be. Right now in this example, I'm using actual times. And the good thing about having this day is, let's say you've got a schedule for the whole week and you want to be able to flip back and forth between January 1st, January 2nd. Now, right now, I don't have anything for January 2nd, but obviously if I switch back to it, then this would not be filled in. And actually, that's one of the problems here. I forgot one criterion. So I have to go back here and select that day and add that in there to say I'm looking at B2. So that was a criteria I forgot to add in there. And there we go. Now it's going to be correct. So Control C, Control V. So all these should be zeros. So that's the really convenient thing about using SUMIFs, is even though it's not really designed for this purpose, this is you can use it because really I'm just summing up a number. I just want to see if there's a number in here. So now right now nobody's working on January 2nd, so I change this back to January 1st, and now the values fill in. So you can toggle if you've got different dates, you can do that easily. Now right now this is not what I want my visual to look like, because obviously I want this to look like a bit of a Gantt chart to show some progression or some range. So now what I'm going to do is use conditional formatting to do this for me. So I'm going to select my entire range and go to conditional formatting. I'm going to create a new rule, use a formula. And anytime using conditional formatting, you want to look at the cell range that you started with. And you can look right here where it says B5. That's where my data starts from. So I'm going to say, okay, if B5 is equal to 0, and the reason I'm using B5 is because it's going to start from this cell and go through and evaluate every single one of these cells. So based on their relative references. So that's why I don't want to freeze anything, because I want the formula to automatically adjust as it evaluates all these cells. So I'm going to say, okay, if it's equal to 0, that means the criteria was not met. And in that case, I'm going to go to Format, go to Custom, and I'm just going to use 3 semicolons, which is basically the same as saying I want no formatting on here. It's better than using just a white fill, just because you may have a different color scheme on your spreadsheet. So doing it this way eliminates any formatting. So gone. Those ones are done. Next thing you can do is go back into conditional format, create another rule. Again, I'm going to do B5 and say B5 is greater than 0. Right? As long as it's more than 0, I know that it's found. I don't really care about the date. I just want to know that there's a value in there. So if it's found, I'm still going to go set this formatting to 3 semicolons because I don't want to see that number. Right? I want to get rid of that number. And I'm going to go to the fill option. And let's say I want a green highlight or dark green. And then for a border, let's also do a dark green. Right? Something like that. So it stands out nicely. I'm going to hit OK. And boom, there we go. Now we can easily see, who worked and what schedule. And, like I said, you could change this if instead of times you wanted to see dates, you can do the same sort of logic. All you really need to do is just change it from hours or timestamps to dates. So let's say I added another employee. So January 1, we've got employee C. And, let's say they worked, let's say 2 p.m. to, let's say 4 p.m. Just a couple hours. So employee C, we'll add them down there. And then I'll grab this and extend this down, right? And in this case, everything still works fine. So I've got those formulas filling in, and just like that, you can quickly see who's working at what shifts, what their shift looks like. So it's an easy way if you needed to manage a schedule or manage your employees to see exactly when they start, when they finish. So not a really complicated formula. Really, it all comes down to one, making sure that you're entering the data correctly. And a key thing is having that space between the AM or PM. And then also using that SUMIFs function as a way to catch all your criteria to make sure you've got the employee the start date, the end date, and even the date, especially if you want to toggle through multiple dates. So that's the benefit of doing it that way. And really, at that point, you're just looking to see if there's a value, and if there is, color it appropriately according to conditional formatting. And it's really easy to expand this out if you have more employees, you've got more data. And by using a table, it's gonna make it a lot easier for your spreadsheet to manage this, because obviously if you don't have this in a table format, you could be looking at a massive range, or let's say you select the entire column, right? It may result in your formula taking a long time to calculate. By using a table, we're sort of constrained to just whatever data we've entered in. So I'd suggest using a table for these types of purposes, just because it limits the scope of what your formula is looking at. So that's how you can create a Gantt chart to track your schedules and shifts and whatever the case you want to do, whether it's vacations or holidays. One other thing I'd point out is that I've also used this for, let's say, color coding different absences. So let's say if someone had a sick day, if someone had a vacation day, you could put in different values. Like right now, I just pulled in the date, but you could have a different color code for, let's say, number 1 could mean that they were sick, so that gets a different color. Number 2 could be they were on vacation, that gets a different color. Number 3 could be they were actually working, so that gets a different color. So you could also color coordinate that way to give you even more information. So hope you found this video useful, and thank you so much for watching.